Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown. Thanks so much for being here. This is our 5th day of our event, Care and Share Big Ideas. Yay! Thanks to everybody for being here. Just a reminder that our archive will be available on the 12th, which is Monday. The evaluation form is going out in 15 minutes after the event ends, so please look for that in your email. Please take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation form. And if you want CEUs, you are required to complete that evaluation form. Okay, so my big idea is every organization needs a Chief Caregiving Officer. I'm going to go ahead and ask everybody to mute during our presentations, and then you can unmute once we begin the conversation. Okay. So last week, the Wall Street Journal released its annual Women in the Workplace study. And the focus of the study really was women and childcare. But I think if we even look at childcare and the stats that they found around the impact of COVID-19 and working at home on women who are raising children, we can equate that that's a similar experience if you are caring for a family member. And what they learned is that 1 in 5 working mothers are thinking about leaving the workforce because they just cannot juggle it all. They can't figure it out because there is no good solution. What's interesting about this, though, is that we lose how much of the workforce is women. We take up more than 54% of the workforce. So if we leave the workforce, there's a huge loss of talent, significant loss of talent. In addition, this report showed that employees are more likely to cite burnout and anxiety over job security as a greater challenge than childcare. And I think you could say childcare and any other caregiving issue. I thought that was really interesting as well. So if you just joined us, go ahead and mute yourself. Okay, so a couple other studies that have been released recently include one from Genworth. So as a result of COVID, 18% of their survey respondents had to spend more time providing assistance to a family member, and that equated to about 9 hours per week. There has been studies around what's the cost to productivity. So it's been valued at $25 billion. So when family caregivers aren't supported in the workplace, the loss of productivity equates $25 billion. And the cost is $13 billion. They can directly relate that cost to healthcare costs. Okay, so we are in a pivotal point in our workplace cultures. And I believe this is the opportunity for organizations to look at who's on staff that supports any employee in a caregiving experience. In my research, I have learned that family caregivers don't go to HR. They go to their manager to talk about caregiving situations. Their manager is the one that can give them approval for time off or flex time or a leave. HR is considered to be the one that represents the company, not the employee, which is again why employees don't go to HR. But what if there was a department separate from HR that was led by a Chief Caregiving Officer? And that team helped manage the family leave policy, provided support and programs to help anyone in a caregiving experience, and then helped those employees who took a leave return to work. If you have taken, for instance, a vacation, you know what it's like when you go back to work. It seems like everything's different. It's very intimidating to go back to work after a significant loss, like the death of a family member. It's also difficult to go back to work after a caregiving crisis. So something significant has happened in your family, you're managing the crisis, your adrenaline is keeping you going, you're keeping in touch as much as possible with the workplace, but you go back and it's different. You're trying to recover from this crisis while just getting right back into work. And that can be a challenge. And what if The culture recognized this and put programs in place so that when you return to work after a caregiving crisis, there's support for you. You've been debriefed. You're going through an onboarding program so that you can get back to work and then feel like, okay, I'm not overwhelmed by both recovery and work. I can manage both. The other thing that happens, and I know you all know this and have experienced this, when you go back to work after the death of a family member, especially after caregiving, the expectation in the office is that you're going to go back to normal, that the situation that was causing you all this stress, caregiving, is now over. And we know that's not the case. When you go back to work grieving after the death of someone you've cared for, chances are you're still attached to that caregiving role because you're settling the estate, you're closing out the caregiving experience, and you still are having perhaps some really difficult discussions with families, with siblings over will and inheritance. In addition, the Chief Caregiving Officer can ensure that managers have the right training so that they can have these conversations with their employees. An employee who's bringing up a caregiving situation with a manager is talking about a very emotional situation. Managers do not have training to have difficult emotional conversations. What if they do now, because there's a Chief Caregiving Officer, because there's a commitment from the organization to have a culture that knows how to have emotional conversations. In addition, we have what we call a family emergency plan. It's a backup planning process, and we call it a family emergency plan. Thanks, Beth. Beth actually picked that name as we were going through what it was going to be called, which is led by a certified caregiving consultant, because we know emergencies happen. Think about what we just learned in March. An organization was not prepared for the pandemic. Employees within the organization were not prepared for a pandemic. You could think of a caregiving crisis as similar to a pandemic. If we're not prepared for it, the organization is disrupted. We all need, every individual within an organization needs a family emergency plan to talk out the what ifs. In addition, every team needs it. And if there is a way to talk about the what ifs, what happens if my mom falls during the night and I have to go to the hospital, and the team knows that there's a plan in place, the business continues. I have had a conversation recently with an organization who's considering creating something like a benchmark survey. How caregiving friendly are we in the workplace? And we were talking about what kind of survey and data to collect. And the conversation was about, let's collect the data about what the employees are going through in a caregiving experience. And to me, we have that data. We know that there's plenty out there, but what we don't know is the burden on the organization. So let's shift from what's the burden on the individual to what's the burden on the organization, because once we have that conversation, once we have those stats, then the organization can't help but think, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this. We need a Chief Caregiving Officer. Okay, so you might think, well, who is the Chief Caregiving Officer within the organization? It's actually anyone who's had a personal caregiving experience. So think about within an organization, how many candidates that organization already has. Think about what we learned during a personal caregiving experience. We learn how to budget, we learn how to manage, we learn how to strategize, how to make decisions, how to reach a compromise, how to diffuse the dysfunction of teams and family systems. That is great leadership right there. Anyone in a caregiving experience now has these tremendous skills as a leader. So within an organization, it's just trying to find that right candidate, but looking to who already has been in a caregiving experience and pulling them up and elevating them to a Chief Caregiving Officer with a staff, with a budget. In addition, you could think about that department that's led by the Chief Caregiving Officer as a revenue generating department. Let's say that caregiving department has programs that employees can buy in, just like the cafeteria. So when you buy food in your company's cafeteria, maybe the company takes a piece of whatever food is sold. So what if there are programs like, for instance, sessions with a certified caregiving consultant. What if that's revenue that's generated that's split between the CCC and the corporation? So this does not have to be a department that is just a cost. It could be a department when run effectively that also generates revenue. Okay, so that's my idea. Every organization needs a chief caregiving officer, and the sooner the better. Otherwise, too much talent is going to leave. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and then hand it over to Rachel. Okay, you're up, Rachel.
Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. As Denise said, I'm Rachel Hiles, and today I'm going to be talking to you about long-term care insurance. So, I just wanted to start out by telling you a little bit about how I got to this point in my journey. So I began caring for my grandmother, who later I found out had Alzheimer's in basically June of 2015. So now we're in year 5 of a very long journey. It became quickly obvious to me that I was not going to be able to manage my grandma's care on my own. I'm the only child. She's the only child. We have no living family. So after a thorough assets review, I discovered that she had a long-term care insurance policy that she had been paying for quite some time, since before 2009. So that policy is rather old. And so I made some demands. I said, Grandma, I can't do this by myself. We're going to have to figure this out. We're going to have to bring in some help. At that time, I hired my cousin and we started paying her cash. I did not leverage the long-term care policy at that point because, which leads me into my next point, I have a background in developmental disabilities. So I spent the first part of my career in the developmental disabilities field, first working as a direct support professional in people's homes, caring for them, then a manager of the direct support professionals. And then I went on to work at the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities here in Missouri. And over that time, I learned about the concept and philosophy of consumer-directed supports. When I first reached out to my grandma's long-term care insurance policy, they were like, consumer-directed supports? What the heck is that? No, you can't do that. And so I kind of just gave up for the time being and just tried to make it work the best I could. As time went on, my grandma's needs increased. And of course, I'm a young person. I want to have my own life. And so I decided to dust the policy off and see if I could try again. And then my brilliant idea came about. So again, the developmental disabilities field is fastly embracing the idea of consumer-directed supports. Sometimes it's also called family-directed supports, but a lot of people who are eligible for Medicaid waivers that support them in their homes get these waivers, and they are able to direct them themselves as consumer-directed or family-directed. Again, the long-term care insurance company was not familiar with this. It just so happened about a couple years ago, I reached out to a friend of mine who was working at a provider agency to find out if she would be willing to basically act as my fiscal intermediary so that I could leverage this long-term care insurance policy. Well, it turns out that she had left that agency and started her own company to do only Medicaid waiver consumer-directed billing. And so I talked to her, we looked at the policy, we reviewed it thoroughly, we developed a care plan, and she essentially became my provider, my home care agency, and we began billing the long-term care insurance policy for caregivers that I personally handpicked and hired and supervised. And we have been doing that now for almost 2 years. We did not start billing insurance immediately. We did start that last year. So her policy, her claim began in March. I know I'm running out of time already. I can't believe it. Okay, so since that time, I've learned a lot. And some of these are lessons learned. I have 4, and then at the end, I have my 2 big ideas. So let me just go through them really fast. So long-term care insurance, the one thing you need to know is that you pay a premium just like you do, a monthly premium. Some people have an annual premium. We have a monthly one, just like regular insurance. Well, one thing you need to know, and actually this is kind of an idea, is if your loved one wants to stay at home and does not want to go into a facility, you still have to pay that premium, which I think is crap. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is be prepared. You have to learn, read that policy inside and out and know everything about it, because one thing is there's an elimination period. That means that you are required to pay for that period out of your own pocket. So if you do not have 10 to 15 grand sitting around, that might not work. That situation might not work for you. My grandma's care costs approximately 5 grand a month. And so back then it wasn't that much, but if you do not have the money to pay your caregivers out of pocket at the beginning, it might not work out for you. Also, they take forever to pay you back. So be prepared for that. Okay. All right. So those are number 2. Number 3 is, this is something I learned, and it's not really a big idea. I just want to make sure everybody's aware. I started paying our caregivers $20 an hour, and I really regret that, because back then their job was much easier than it is now, and I didn't leave myself any room to increase their pay. So now I have to go up from $20. Holy crap, that's a lot of money, you guys. Okay, number 4 is, so as I mentioned, I sought out my friend Julie, who had launched her own business doing Medicaid consumer-directed billing. So I talked to her and we negotiated a rate. So my caregivers, on paper, they are costing us $26.20 an hour. That's because I told her I don't want them making any less than $20. This is after taxes come out of their check. But she gets a cut of every hour they work. Back then I was in such a frenzy trying to get this all situated that I just didn't even care. But now I'm like, holy crap, if I have, you could do the math. Like, let's just say it's $3 for every hour. If my cousin Kylie comes in here and works 40 hours a week, that's $160, 160 hours a month times 3. Do the math. That's a lot of money. That lady's getting paid a lot of money, and her workload doesn't, it doesn't go up based on the amount of hours they work. So you should, I know I'm out of time. Okay, let me get to my last things. Okay, this is something that really should change. Okay, wait. Let me go back. So negotiate a base fee with your fiscal intermediary. So that way you're not feeling like you're getting ripped off when your caregivers are working 18 hours a day. Okay. My 5th point is long-term care insurance policies normally do not allow family members to be paid to provide care. This is a big idea that needs to change because we are, as we all know, the long-term care system of America. It is, vastly, is very apparent that people want to live at home, and we're the ones who are going to make it happen. So if you are directly, very closely related to your loved one, you may not get paid to provide care. You have to negotiate it in a care contract or something like that. Last point, and I know I'm like right on time here. Okay, my last point is, in the long-term care insurance world, there is something called the daily rate. That is what they reimburse you for at the end of the month, is a daily rate. Well, you and I both know that things change from day to day, and that's crap. Okay, they should give us a flexible monthly amount like Medicaid does. The government, Medicaid, government funded long-term care is better in that way than private paid long-term care insurance, because they, what if I want to go on a vacation? I can't even do that because I'm stuck to this daily rate. Now, if they would give me a chunk of money that I could stretch out through the month and maybe even roll over into the next one, because, I might not need somebody, all the time. That's, the long and short of it is, long-term care insurance is highly inflexible, and you have to learn your policy very well to know how you can maximize it for your own situation. But the bottom line is that daily rate is a killer because, if you have to pay for care or anything beyond that daily rate and what it covers, it's all coming out of your pocket. And if you want to go to NCC 19 or you want to take a break by the beach or anything else, it's coming. You have to pay out of your own bank account, or the kindness of other people's hearts. So, long-term care insurance companies are used to dealing with long-term care facilities. They are not family friendly. And that's pathetic because we're paying for long-term care insurance. It's not funded by taxes or anything else. And so I think we should all collectively demand that long-term care insurance become more flexible to meet our needs. Because again, I said it probably 8 times, we are the long-term care system of America. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I think what's interesting is you've really honed in to the fact that long-term care insurance was created, I first heard about it in 1992, so it has not actually become anything other than what it was in 1992. And the industry itself has had a difficult time. The companies that were original in offering long-term care insurance are gone. There's just a few companies left, and part of it is they lost so much money because of all the claims. Yes. So I think what would be the replacement for long-term care insurance could be something to think about too. Okay. All right, so what do you guys think? Chief Caregiving Officer, and we demand long-term care insurance actually step up to the plate with timely, relevant options and solutions for us.
I see a question from Teresa Williams that says, would I say that long-term care insurance is beneficial? Absolutely. Because as I said, my grandma's care at this point is costing me, well, not me, her, $5,000 a month at least. And there is no way she will be able to pay that out of pocket. So I thank God that my Uncle Kenny had the foresight to set that up before he passed away. Rest in peace, Uncle Kenny. I do not believe that he was prepared at all to provide any care. I think they were gonna, I think they must have talked about it, and she was probably gonna end up in a facility somewhere, but there is no way I am putting my grandma in a facility, especially not now. So yes, it's absolutely beneficial. It's just, it comes with so much red tape and confusion. The people who work for those companies are not educated at all about, you know, trends and best practices when it comes to providing care. And they, you know, lean towards the, you know, the market of long-term care facilities, unfortunately.
And I also think, God, I had a thought. I'm going to just keep going because I can't remember what I had. So I'm just going to ask you guys in the chat room, say, if someone offered you the position of Chief Caregiving Officer within an organization, would you take it? Oh, you know what I was thinking? So Rachel, you started talking out with your asset review process. I also think it would be interesting to think about how many years am I going to buy into long-term care insurance? What's my monthly premium? What would happen if I invested that money in a different way? What if I created my own individual long-term care insurance policy? Because then it becomes truly consumer directed. Yes, my power
And
of
then,
attorney.
yes, you know what? Yes, long-term care insurance is great, but what if they had taken that money that they were going to, you know, pay their premiums with and invested it and let it grow?
Right.
They would have more and more money.
And you don't have the rigmarole of trying to work through the bureaucracy of long-term care insurance companies.
Right.
That are they're insurance companies. So when we think about companies that pivot, that that change how they offer products, you do not think of insurance companies. So they are coming directly from, we are underwriters, we do risk analysis, we look at the numbers, but they don't necessarily look at trends in the industry and think about how could their product adjust based on what's happening within the industry. And certainly, the trend now is that you might not be able to think about placement as an option for your family member because of COVID. So what happens if your long-term care insurance policy is very restrictive and will only pay for placement, for instance? That's why you have to really think about any policy you buy. You want to make sure it's flexible, that it really gives you some choice as to where care is delivered, how it's delivered, and who delivers it.
Yes. And also be aware of like how long that plan will pay out, because there's a lifetime limit, which means it'll last forever. And there's also, you know, a set amount of time. Like if you max out on, you know, whatever coverage you'll offer, well, then you're screwed. Go back to, I have a question from Teresa Williams, which says, do I know when she set it up? Like how many years prior to her actually using it? I'm asking for my mom. Well, I just looked on the thing and the file cabinet. They set it up in 2001. So this policy is almost 20 years old. Okay. It has a lifetime limit, so it will just last forever, however, wherever we end up, you know, whatever. So, but yeah, you're right. You got to look at that stuff, Denise, because premiums can be quite expensive. Like her premium is $420 a month. And then you know, say for example, we pay the lady who is billing our insurance $500 a month. We're getting taxed $1,000 to keep her at home. That's stupid. It's supposed to be the other way around. So anyway, oh man, my face is turning red. You got my blood pressure all up.
I also want to mention that the time to look for buying long-term care insurance is when you're young. And that if there is a diagnosis, typically that eliminates the possibility of buying long-term care.
Yes. They will not give you long-term care insurance if they think you're really sick. And it will be cheaper for you too. Yes. You buy it way before you need it. Yes.
Kathy has typed something in the chat room that I think is interesting. So where she works, 2 employees who are eligible for family medical leave talked about doing that because of caregiving responsibilities. One of the employees went to talk to Kathy's boss and resigned, and one went to talk to Kathy and took FMLA. So Kathy, can you unmute yourself? I'm just curious, what do you think was the difference in the conversations that the employees had with your boss and then you.
Sure. Well, I think part of it is that obviously I have a background in caregiving, so I was more receptive, and more aware of what the options were for the person who came to me. The person who came to me had a child at home that she needed care for. The person who went to my boss had a disabled child that she needed care for. And that conversation sort of went to the resignation place before I even knew about it. And so I wasn't able to get into the conversation. We did backtrack and say, do you want to go on FMLA instead? Because now there's COVID-related FMLA available. But at that point, she'd already made her decision and applied for COVID-related unemployment. But I could see that if we had a consistent program, and a, yes, go to this point person, that it would have made the difference for that person.
And I also think it's a conversation that you have before it's a crisis. And we see what happened because it was a crisis conversation because of COVID. People were just like, I'm in an urgent situation. I just have to make a decision. We want to have a conversation so that the decision is well planned, because sometimes there could be something else that could help us stay employed, but we don't have the time to research it. And we don't have the time to think through how could it work? How could we implement it? There's a conversation that's ongoing, that is part of just business as usual. I think that can really help. I also think sometimes what happens in a caregiving situation is we think, oh God, you know what, I'm just gonna get through this, until we can't get through it anymore. And we think, oh my God, I need medical leave. Rather than talking it out earlier to say, this is starting to become a struggle. What options, solutions, programs, services could help? We're just worried about talking about it. So if there's a chief caregiving officer right then says, this is part of our business. We talk about this. We know it's happening. And so we have regular conversations to ensure the business continues. If the family and the employee are taken care of, then we know the business continues.
And I think if you said to people ahead of time, this is one of your benefits, we have a chief caregiving officer who you can go to, when issues arise, then that would set that stage for that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. I think Beth's comment is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would automatically lift. Is it lift the stigma family caregivers feel about talking about caregiving at work?
Yeah, sorry, typo, yes.
And Danelle is wondering, where do we get the data that shows that a chief caregiving officer actually can be something that saves money while generating money? And that is the ongoing question. How do we find the value of the burden on the organization? So the organization says, we cannot continue unless we really truly address this issue and make it a normal part of the culture. What's interesting is actually these two ideas do have overlap, because there are companies that offer long-term care insurance as a benefit to its employees. So you can start buying in at a lower price point because it's an employee benefit. So thinking about having that overall conversation about caring for our family members, caring for ourselves could be helpful. There are seminars that companies will do for retirement planning. But we don't ever do any seminars for planning to have children or planning to be prepared in case caregiving becomes a situation that's happening in the family. Just kind of interesting. And I do think these return to work programs can really truly be a huge benefit to help family caregivers. Yeah, Danelle is talking about a new benefit called Compassionate Society that is underwritten by Nationwide. And I did talk to the founder CEO of Compassionate Society a couple weeks ago to hear about how his program is structured. And it was interesting. So the Compassionate Society basically allows you to save money that you can use when you take a leave. And I think you can actually use up to 80% of your salary for paid leave. It's almost like supplemental insurance, supplemental disability insurance. So you pay a premium every month, and then when you need to take a leave, you are able to cover up to 80% of the cost of your salary during your leave. What do you guys think about that? Yay or nay? You could say yes or no, or maybe in the chat room. And again, that's an employer benefit that could be voluntary. It also could be a paid benefit, so the employer might pay that premium for you, depending on how it's structured. Wondering if anybody has taken unpaid leave recently? Okay. Right, yeah. Yeah, Sherry's thinking the same as I am. Right, FMLA is unpaid, and this Compassionate Society offers the opportunity for a paid benefit. Again, you pay into it, so you're actually saving, which always leads me to the question around insurance programs. The insurance programs really are almost like this savings program, rather that is structured for us. And I often wonder, what if we ourselves had our own savings program? What if we just were able to take that premium and save it ourselves? One of the things that we've talked about doing, and we've set it up with our training program. So our Certified Family Care Manager training program, we talked about that the other day. Once they become certified, they have a profession. That's a profession they can list on their resume. If they leave the workforce for a period of time, they don't have a gap on their resume. They have that they are a Certified Family Care Manager. Ultimately, what would be great if these Certified Family Care Managers are part of a membership organization. They pay a membership fee, which allows them to buy health insurance at a group rate, and then maybe there is some other benefit like a savings account, a retirement plan. So when you leave the workforce, you are not paying into Social Security. We know that's a huge problem for family caregivers. How are they saving for their own retirement? So what if they left the workforce, they had some program that reimbursed them? It could be a Medicaid waiver program, a Medicare Advantage program, and because they're certified and have passed this set of criteria to become certified, they now qualify for reimbursement. They can receive pay for providing care. Then they pay into a membership, like $50 a year, and that puts them into that group benefit for health insurance as well as retirement saving. And they connect with a financial planner to help them put some plan in place. Rachel also kind of talked about this, and that is your family could reimburse you. So let's say I become a Certified Family Care Manager. My siblings say, you know what, Denise, we need you to be full-time helping our parents. We work out a salary. They pay me a certain amount of money. I buy into this membership program. I buy my health insurance, and I have a savings plan. I have a contract between my parents and my siblings that's drafted and approved by an attorney so that I'm required to do certain things, and they are required to pay me a certain amount of money. Okay, so it's really, I appreciate all the comments in the chat room. So Sherry's writing, so as a former insurance salesperson, saving yourself is easier said than done. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. One of the problems is that individuals do not fully understand how to create investments that are tied to the stock market as well as those are not. So you really have to have that expertise of a financial planner to figure out, okay, I'm investing this much every year and I want it to grow to this in 10 years or 20 years. What's the investment strategy? Okay, and so Beth was able to take paid family medical leave when she was caring for her dad. And Kathy is reminding us that Families First Act includes paid family medical leave. And that's what the employees took at her organization. And then the VA does have some ability to help with family, paying for family caregiving. Okay, so what else are you thinking about with these two ideas? I know it feels like they get bigger and bigger, right? And it's interesting how these two ideas that never seem to be connected always somehow find that connection. I'm just curious if anybody has had to take an extended leave from caring for a family member. In essence, you left the workforce because of caregiving.
My sister did actually, when my dad needed more, when he needed full-time care and we were evaluating all the options. She didn't like her job and she wanted to do it. And it took about a 2-minute discussion to figure out how this could potentially work. We all said, let's just sort of think about it. Luckily, everybody got along. There weren't dynamics that were issues, and figured out how we could work it so that it seemed fair to everybody. And it was great for like 1.5 years until my dad passed away. And she found true love in the process, by the way.
Oh, there you go. So you never know, right? You never know. So
Technically, sorry.
oh no, go for it, Rachel.
Technically, so I have my own business, but technically I did leave the workforce. 2.5 years ago, another one of my loved ones became very ill, and I didn't know at the time that he was going to pass away, but his care provider that was providing 24-hour supports walked out on us when the hospital discharged him on hospice. And so at that time, I quit my job. I was kind of in the same boat as Beth's sister. I was getting to my tipping point, and my boss tried to negotiate with me a little bit, like, you don't have to leave, we'll work something out. And I even asked about taking FMLA, and that's when she said that, you don't need to do that, we'll figure it out. And I was like, no, don't ever let your boss put you in any kind of situation where they're gonna figure it out. You need in writing everything, black and white. Like, there's no room to negotiate. And no. So yeah.
I just think it's interesting conversations to have about the what ifs. And it's just not conversations that we have. And if we were required as employees to have a family emergency plan that's reviewed every year and talk it out with someone who is not invested in anything other than helping us create the right strategies and decisions for us, I think it can help not only our current career, but also our career aspirations. So it's interesting, Rachel, you and Beth's sister both were like, you know what, this is not where I want to be in my career, so I'm okay leaving the workplace. But what if the conversation is, I'm not okay with, I want more out of my career. What are the opportunities beyond leaving the workforce that I also can manage my caregiving experiences?
Well, and that's funny that you say that. I mean, I don't have a family emergency plan, but what I did at the time was sat down and wrote every possible thing I could do to make money aside from selling myself, to see, like, okay, what are my options here? At the very bottom of the list was like, well, if all else fails, we'll just move in with grandma. So I guess at the end of my rope, just kidding. Actually, no. I do have my business that keeps me quite busy, but yeah, I think you're absolutely on point when it comes to planning for the future and thinking through your options, because if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have just quit my job that way. But it was a crisis situation, and employers, as we have figured out, are not with those at all. So
it's
is totally needed.
It is a conversation that unless you have an expertise in, it's hard for you to offer solutions, ideas, a bigger way of thinking about the options. And I also think we're kind of skirting around the real issue, which is how do we remain in the workforce so we can actually save for our own retirement? And we are running into a situation where maybe in 15 years, so many family caregivers left the workplace, they weren't able to put and invest in retirement funds. How are they going to make it? I just envision this huge problem. And there's not enough conversation about it. You know, the only conversation on the political platform has been when Joe Biden released his idea for the caregiving economy. I really do believe that the caregiving situation is an economic issue. When we look at solving it from the economic standpoint, we can really think about interesting ideas because it changes how the conversation happens. So if we think about what's the economy, and then how do we keep the economy moving forward, we have to look at caregiving. I wonder how many of you guys, and this is a yes or no, how many of you feel like you are prepared for retirement with the money that you've invested and saved? Yeah, hoping so, right? Fingers crossed, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I'm also curious, how many of you have your own long-term care insurance policy that you've purchased for yourself? So, okay. It's hard for me to see hands. I did see one hand, but if you type in the chat room, yes to long-term care insurance policy. Oh, Teresa, but you started saving. That's awesome. You know what? You're a yes. You say no, but you're a yes if you have started saving at 26. You're awesome. Okay, so a few of you do have a long-term care insurance policy. I don't. Rachel doesn't. Okay, so Diane is working to get there. She's increased her contributions. Okay, here's another question. How many of you have a regular meeting with a financial planner? We'll just say regular. Once a year, once every 2 years? Okay, so Teresa's really thinking about her future because she wants to ensure her future is care at home for herself. So she's got her value, she's got her priority, and so she's moving back from that. Okay, I want to stay at home. What do I need to do to ensure that I stay at home? So I wonder, Rachel, if a call to action is to have a meeting with a financial planner. You started off your conversation with you did an asset review. What if we all say, let's do an asset review with a financial planner? What do you think about that? Rachel, what do you think as a
I think that's a great idea. I did not actually work with a professional. I just went through the millions and millions of papers my grandma had, trying to figure it all out. And even then, I didn't uncover everything she had. So I highly, highly recommend it. The problem I think is, again, there's so many people who are just ignorant of all of our issues as family caregivers.
and we are the best advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, hey man, y'all need to
Right.
become financial planners on here.
Right. I mean, I know that it can get exhausting to always feel like, okay, well, let me explain this to you. Well, this is why it's illogical the way you're asking me to do stuff. However, it is up to us to educate. And we can also look at it as the gift we're giving to the next family caregiver who calls.
Yes.
So
yes.
if the person that calls before me does a little advocating and then I do a little more and then the next one after me, that's how we change. It's a little bit of advocating along the way.
Yeah.
So the idea that we have a conversation about our assets with a financial planner or someone that we trust, it can be helpful. And I used to do this podcast every month with Ellen Rogan. Some of you met Ellen at our our fourth National Caregiving Conference. And she would always say, we have a fear of looking at our money because we think it's such a desperate situation. However, she said the best way to understand your money is to look at it, and it will get better once you look at it. If you don't look at it, it can never get better. So take a realistic view of it so you know where you can go, because you can always go up. It does not have to be a desperate situation. So get some good planning tools in place, commit to a savings plan and see what what you can get going. Even $1 a day makes a difference. So that's one big idea, is to start thinking about your own plan for your future, do a asset review for yourself and your carry if possible. And my ask of you is to really think about what are your leadership skills. So I'm going to ask you over the weekend to think of 3 leadership skills you have developed in a personal or professional caregiving experience that would qualify you to be a Chief Caregiving Officer. So just a reminder that you have the skills already. Okay, any last questions or thoughts before we close? Okay, thanks everybody. So appreciate you being here with us this week. It was really just great to connect with all of you. We're going to do this again in February. You'll find information about this when you go to the archive page on Monday. And I would encourage you, if you have a big idea, to submit a proposal to present when we do this again the first week in February. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.